We are back, ladies and gentlemen, dogs and cats, people of all stripes.
Bees and bees.
And bees and bees, birds and bees.
Bees and bees.
How are you, mate?
I'm splendid. How are you doing, my friend?
I am fantastic too. Here we are again on another wonderful day where too much culture is barely enough. And we are talking today about, let me ask you a question, my good friend. What did you wake up for today and say that you are grateful for today?
I woke up to being grateful for having gotten enough sleep, because lately that hasn't always been the case. I was more than happy and grateful for once again noticing that my dear wife of 19 years was sleeping next to me, or waking up next to me. That was amazing to see that every morning. It's a gift. And then I don't want to get too philosophical here yet. Walking the dog around the block, seeing public works people with their concrete saw blade cutting up the street in front of my house, creating a ruckus. I saw that people have work. In these times, it's not always the case, as we know. So I was grateful that I have work. There are so many things to be grateful for that I think what we talked about yesterday, self-awareness, being aware of the things in our lives that are great or that are worthy to be thankful of. Yeah. What about you? What were you thankful for, Brett?
All the same, yes. Waking up to a beautiful day, wonderful family, all the good things we get to share, great friends like yourself and all the people, I wake up with messages from all around the world. The thing about interacting with people all around the globe is that you kind of get your phone in the morning and go, oh my goodness, there's going to be all these, which is great. You have people all different time zones. You get to connect with people. What's happened in the last, time doesn't stop, right? The sun goes up and the sun goes down. But I think it's fantastic. But I want to bring up a point, because something I was thinking about last night that you actually wrote. The things we're grateful for out of the bad things are tragedies that happen in life. Yeah. I would use an example. This is funny, and I probably never said this out loud, but I am eternally grateful for the fact that even though it's never a great experience, but having parents that divorce at an early age, when you're a kid, right, in an early age. So I had that experience, but I have really identified a lot of positives that came out of it, right? Yes, I fought against it and all that kind of stuff. But what it's taught me is that you can have two parents that fundamentally are two different people that separate ways, and then as you grow up as a child of these two parents, often sharing time between two parents, you find yourself, it's not, I don't think it's as deep as third culture kid upbringing, but it's basically learning two different ways of being, having to be a certain way with one family and a certain way with another. And because my families were two different, for different reasons. And I think it's given me the gift of, like you said, the gift before, the gift of actually being able to adapt, being able to be not unauthentic or anything like that, but be able to kind of adapt my behavior. And we talk about this culturally all the time, style switching. It's one thing that I really think that I've got a good gift for. Now, another thing that you wrote something about a gift of something that was very tragic in your country, and right. And this is the gift of the Holocaust to Germany. And I've actually got the link up here. I'm going to share it in the comments, because I actually found it and I thought it was a great way to look at it. But just kind of put a bit of a wrapper around what you're meaning in that.
Yeah, that could come out of context if we say the Holocaust was a gift. At face value, it certainly wasn't. However, I phrased it that way in that blog that I wrote several years ago. Because I changed the narrative for myself around the memory of the Holocaust. Now, I grew up in Germany, and I was born 35 years after the end of World War II, and I learned through the Holocaust, or I learned about the Holocaust through education, through the public school system. And it was mandatory when I went to high school that the class take a field trip to a concentration camp. In my case, it was more than that. It was what would be considered an extermination camp. My class went to Dachau, which is just outside of Munich. It's one of the Dachau, Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen, Birkenau. Those were probably the big ones where most people got murdered. So when you're 14, 15 years old and they walk you through the gas chambers, which were masked as shower rooms, that's when, forgive my French or my crude English, that's when the shit gets real. That's when it sinks in that this is not just a page in your history book, that this is people only 60 years removed in the timeline that may or may not have been your grandparents who were actively participating in this. So I'm one that I generally refer to that time as my grandparents' generation, not to blame my grandparents for anything they did or didn't do, but that's how it puts it into a historic context for me. And when I say grandparents, I think it sounds closer as if I say, well, this was 75 years ago or 80 years ago. No, this was my grandparents' generation. Why is this a gift? Because for the longest time in my country, in my culture, especially my generation, felt that we've inherited a guilt. And it was only through many, many conversations with friends and people that I met that are of Jewish faith who taught me and told me that there's nothing I personally am accountable for, that there's nothing I should feel guilty of, and that in the Jewish faith world, guilt doesn't work this way and it's not passed on through the generations. So I was able to reframe it for myself as an obligation, as a cultural, national obligation to commemorate and to honor the pain of the victims and those that came after. So I see it as a gift for Germany because it allows Germany to look at itself, to look at its demons, and by doing that, entering a path of healing. And we're talking about gratefulness. So I feel grateful, and I'm borrowing the words of German President Steinmeier, who I think he said it this year in his speech commemorating the liberation of Auschwitz. He said that Germany has the gift of reconciliation, and because Israel and the Jewish people extended that olive branch to Germany, because Germany did the introspection, because Germany does or continues to do its atonement and looking at its demons and acknowledging the pain. And therefore we have that branch, that olive branch extended to us. Therefore we have the gift of reconciliation. And I'm grateful for that personally, because I don't know what my grandparents did during that time. I've had many conversations, but I didn't meet all my grandparents because some of them died during that time. So I don't know how much inherited guilt I potentially have in my family. But I'm also grateful for the healing that can be done over generations, because the pain is still there, right? So you talk to any Holocaust survivor or their children or grandchildren, there is a pain that is lingering. And if we and I like to make that transfer to the United States, because there's also been a pain lingering for generations that is unresolved and that rears its ugly head every now and then, and we're currently seeing it quite a bit. So you can be grateful for something that's horrible. I'm not horrible for the things that happen. I'm grateful for how we manage to move through this and work through this pain. We cannot undo what happened. However, we can define how we want to move forward together or separately, with good emotions or negative emotions. And I choose positive.
Yep. That's great. See, I threw that on you, didn't I? You didn't know.
You did, yeah. Thank you.
No,
Thank
that's
you.
cool. No, because it was just coming to mind. I mean, I'm reading a couple of books at the moment. I actually one that's like, you think it would be a little bit more dog-eared for a 2600-year-old book, but
Hold it up again. I couldn't see that.
is the Tao Te Ching.
Ah.
Yeah, the Tao, right? The Tao. It says, we're talking about collective cultures, and we talk about individualistic cultures, and it was just something I was reading or revisiting, something that came out of a workshop a couple of years ago at a CETA conference about from Dr. Schulz about inherited culture, right? So you just referred to inherited trauma, which carries on through generations. This is the metaphor of of having a snail and a rabbit and lettuce, like two animals and two inanimate, like lettuce, two foods, right? The monkey and the banana and the lettuce and the snail, and groups are asked to group things together in terms of what do you put together. Aristotle talks about the kind of the identity, the intrinsic identity of each individual thing on the planet. Then people often put together just the animals. They talk about the snail and the monkey go together because they're animals, right? Whereas other collective more cultures look at it like saying, well, no, clearly the banana and the monkey belong together because they rely on each other. They rely on each other and the snail and the lettuce, right?
Right.
So this is something I've been thinking in a larger context of kind of looking out of the bigger picture and be grateful for the lessons that you can learn from the perspective of other people. Yes, these traumas, these tragedies, these horrible things that have taken place are always going to be horrible. That inherited trauma is always going to exist. But for us to take a step back and understand it and use it as a gift to learn is something that I think is really a gift, right?
And I think it's easy for us male, pale, white people to look at the trauma from a Eurocentric angle. And when I say Eurocentric, that includes Australia, New Zealand, it includes North America. Forgive me for my geographical inaccuracies. Hello, Tamara. I like that mask in the profile picture.
It looks great, doesn't it? And Tamara, from Dublin, Ireland.
I took my mask off for the recording. I hope that's okay. Now there's other big traumas, culturally induced or often more politically induced traumas that haven't been completely healed yet. So you look at the conflict in Rwanda, the Hutu and the Tutsi. You look Hutu and Tutsi. You look at the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. You look at the trauma that many people in Russia are still recovering from Stalin ages, how many people got killed there. And there's multiple other traumas. We can look at the trauma of slavery, obviously. We can look at the trauma of the displacement or the genocide of indigenous people whenever colonialization happens. I had this conversation over 4th of July with a friend who is originally from the Congo, and we talked about the Belgian colonist era and how what type of atrocities happened there. So I mean, as a German, it's easy to focus on the Holocaust. As a person in the US, it's easy to focus on slavery. These traumas have happened over the course of history in many pockets of the world. And I think there are lessons to be learned from how these cultures have dealt with that trauma in the aftermath. And some of them have dealt with them in a healthy way, others in a less healthy way. But in any case, I think there are lessons to be drawn from that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The and I forget his name, the president of the I think the current, they call him the president of the well, now I'm going to forget the whole thing. When you mentioned that Man, that's terrible. It's terrible.
Rewind that tape, Brett. It was there.
I gotta rewind that tape. It was about something about the African American experience, and an African American leader saying, you know, this is essentially when he studies the history, right? When he studies this history, it gives him hope, right? It's a tragic history. It's a history with trauma and the trauma that still exists, but he has hope in looking at all the stories that came out of that and see the hope that comes out of a people that still believe in this country, and we're sitting in the US, but still believe in this country and its possibility, even though this country is, in many cases, never given hope to those people, right? Never given voice to those people. I thought that was very impactful, right? So we're continually learning and working through this.
And I think this is where our educational systems are on the hook here. I think, and to a certain extent, who's she calling seniors? I'm not sure what she's talking about. Do you want to compare ages tomorrow? I know for a fact. So if you look at history, I think it really matters who wrote the book that you learn the history from. And I noticed this in growing up in the German school system, and then afterwards reading other books in college and university, and not only by German scholars, but also by international historians, that the perspective on the historic event could slightly change. And that also changes how I feel and think about the event. So it was my daughter in middle school who brought a book, an author, to my attention that was up until then unknown to me because I didn't grow up in this country, in the United States, that is. An author by the name of Howard Zinn, Z-I-N-N. The book is called A People's History of the United States. And it is magical because it looks at historic events through the lens of those that were the passive receivers of events and not the active, actors or perpetrators, however you want to say it. So it looks at U.S. history, slavery history, through the eyes of slaves or freed slaves. It looks at the colonization period of the 1500s through the eyes of the indigenous people. So it really depends on who writes the history and what do we allow to teach ourselves and our children. So going back to gratefulness, the word that we started out with, I am grateful to live in a world, or in this case, in a societal system that allows me access to different schools of thought, that allows me access to other voices. And I know part of my country where I'm from in my lifetime, before German reunification, was not allowed to do that, right? So I know from immediate experience that this type of freedom and this type of liberty is not granted to everyone on this beautiful planet. So I'm grateful for the pluralism of thought.
Absolutely. And we're grateful for everybody for joining us, of course. And we love your questions, comments, and we invite them. This ongoing series will not work unless we get some interaction. And we've had some great comments and people sending us things, encouragement, and that's always wonderful. But we do invite you to share this with everybody that you know and you love, and the connections that you have, and bring those with you, so that we can have the chance to talk about them. We're coming up with things that are on our mind every day. I'm surprising my good colleague here with with topics, and we will continue to do so. I'm trying to get more of an organic way of bringing these topics to mind, which means sometimes we'll make mistakes, and that's okay, because I've made plenty in the past and I'll continue to do them. You're muted.
He mistakes? I didn't mute myself. Who said that?
You made mistakes. He muted himself. By
the way, if you're wondering how you get in touch with us, or how you can post your questions or story ideas or how you raise your hand to participate, that's also an option. Those of you who don't know us that well yet and who are brought to this broadcast because somebody shared it on their wall and you just happen to stumble upon us, these are our socials, as much as we could put them there. Get in touch with us or post a comment on whatever medium you're using. There's going to be a comment box probably underneath this video frame. Use that and we'll figure it out.
Absolutely. And as we promised, we will get you out of here just in time to make your next very important meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Right, wherever time that is, at the top of the hour, or it might be later in the afternoon, like our good friend Tamara is probably entertaining a cocktail or two. You can tell us what that might be, Tamara. Thank you very much for joining.
I hope it doesn't lead to senior moments tomorrow.
Yeah.
Also, make sure that if you're still up for that, at 1:45 Eastern time, which will be a quarter to 8 p.m. in Central Europe, or it will be a quarter to 11 on the Pacific coast, I believe. Man, I'm doing these time zone conversions in my head. Brett and I will have a wonderful friend on to talk about how music might be an interesting tool for our work.
Yes, absolutely. Good interview with Vicky Fly Hudson, who is a diversity and inclusion specialist speaker, but also a musician, which I happen to be one myself. And don't underestimate my good friend here, my good colleague, who has quite a history in the music field and from other perspective, of course. And we will bring that to the discussion as well. Again, thank you again, my friend. It is always a pleasure. We will see you again tomorrow, same time, same bat channel, right here at 8:33 in the morning Central, 9:33 Eastern, and not yet. Tomorrow says not yet. Come on, it's Ireland. These people.
Get with it, lady.
Yeah, who says you have to stick to the time frame? You have to, All righty, guys. Thank you very much again. We'll see you later on today for our interview, but otherwise you can come and join us again tomorrow. Thank you again. We love you. Bye.
Thank you. I'm grateful for you.
Absolutely. We're grateful for everybody. I've got to get back to my thing. Look at this. New zinger.